Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, an in-depth look at how to secure government and defense industry facilities in a time of increasingly sophisticated threats. With ever more complicated emerging tools creating new risks for breaches at sensitive sites, how can companies and the DoD keep out bad actors? We talked to two experts on how to stay ahead of evolving threats. Coming to you from the nation's capital, it's the latest in news and analysis, from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly.
Good afternoon. I'm Casey Loftman, Senior Editor for Defense News. Thank you for joining us for today's webcast, The Challenges of Government and Defense Industry Facility Security. My guests today are Mary Rose McCaffrey and Charlie Phelan. Mary Rose McCaffrey is former Director of Security for the CIA and former Vice President of Security for Northrop Grumman. She has also held senior security positions across the intelligence community, Department of Defense, and other government agencies. She is a member of the Board of Advisors for the Council on Intelligence Issues and is the president of the Cygnus Society, a CIA retiree association. Charlie Phelan is the principal of C.S. Phelan and Associates. He has more than 5 decades of security experience in both government and industry, including serving as the first director of the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency and director of the National Background Investigations Bureau. He also held several other senior security roles in the government and is former vice president of corporate security for Northrop Grumman. Mary Rose, Charlie, thank you for joining me today.
We're glad to be here.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and get started. And Mary Rose, I'm going to direct this first question to you, but then I also want to hear from Charlie on it. And one of the big challenges of defense and defense industry facility security is compliance requirements. And with those requirements continually evolving, what are some things that security leaders should look for when they're planning to make sure their security programs are prepared to meet future requirements?
Thank you, Casey. So security leaders need to look for a number of things, but first they need to understand what their security requirements are. So requirements come in many forms. From a security standpoint, it depends upon the customer, and the customer usually has a set of requirements. You have internal requirements in terms of company requirements, building requirements, and programmatic requirements. And these requirements require the security leader to understand what those things are and what the why is for the corporation so that they make a business value to the corporation. And then in the why of that scenario, they can further inform and articulate to their leadership the value of the expense they're about to spend. In that scenario, it is all driven based upon the risk and the threat. And so although the requirements are the guidance, the risk and the threat may either raise or lower those requirements. And in each of these requirements, they have to understand before they actually write a word of a plan, what their customer wants, what their customer needs, what their company needs, and how they are going to execute in what period of time. So Charlie, you had some additional thoughts on that.
Sure. Mary Rose, to follow on that point, articulating the why is fundamental and is often overlooked in the rush to simply comply with the regulations. Important to understand why the customer established these rules, and 2 reasons lead to this, I think, as you pointed out. It is easier to explain to your boss why you need to either expand or create from new countermeasures. And even more importantly, as you are developing that countermeasures program, it gives you a better sense of what the possibilities might be if you understand precisely what it is that is causing this threat and elevating this risk. It's important to keep in mind that the threat scenarios that drive these risks are sometimes old, sometimes new, and constantly evolving. To the point, the old attack scenarios don't just go away when new attack scenarios appear. If you look back at trying to build embassies overseas in, say, Moscow in 1970s, the same challenge to protecting that construction site exists today when trying to build a new embassy someplace else in the world here. Secondly, if you look at a crowd gathering and what that might mean in front of the embassy in Tehran in 1975. How would that have matched with the crowd gathering in front of the consulate in Benghazi 40 years later? All of this is important to keep in mind, that these problems just don't go away here. Last point on this thing, really, in order to understand this environment and its countermeasure, it is really important to build communications with your customers and, more importantly, with others in your business area here. There's many examples in the government and industry ecosystem about this thing. An interesting but very true fact, the CEOs of the various companies in this business, frankly, in any business area, don't go around sharing their proprietary and corporate strategies openly with their counterparts, with their competimates, I guess. But when you get into the security community, my experience has been over those 50 years is that the security community is more than welcome, more than willing to share threat and risk information across that spectrum, because we all understand and have understood for a long, long time that we are all suffering from and subject to the same level of threats and same kind of attack scenarios. And we all have to assume the same level of risk. So we're in this together, and the communications is absolutely important.
And Charlie, that's a really interesting point you made there at the end that I'd like to follow up on, which is, company A and company B may be competitors, so their CEOs would never dream of sharing information, but the security people talk. This is a close-knit community, and it really is a common good type of thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's very, very important to find those outlets to build those relationships. It's not just a one-on-one, pick up the phone and call somebody or try to hit them on a LinkedIn app or something. It is really attending the various organizational elements that have been set up and functioning for several years, whether it's ASIS or NCMS or AIA, NDIA, the support communities, have sessions annually or biannually where you can get together and meet people and build those relationships and make them very, very strong. And I will tell you, there are people that I've been working with literally for this 50 years that I'm still working with today because of those relationships.
And one of the other things there, Casey, from a standpoint of the relationships, many in the federal space often meet monthly. It's a small group of people, and they grew up together, and they're now leading organizations, and they meet monthly. And their industry colleagues do the same thing. So this is one of those things where team sports, there's no I in team. And the security professionals, one threat is a threat to all.
And then, Mary Rose, we talked about compliance, and I have a question about that. As you go forward, you have your plans in place, you meet your compliance requirements to start, but then once you're in that ongoing operations phase, how do you make sure that you're remaining in compliance? What are some of those key warning signs to say, hey, we might have a compliance issue here, and then how can you address that?
So this is always my favorite part of the business. So everybody loves the new shiny objects. They build a beautiful new facility and they have beautiful new spaces. And then a year later, no one's tested alarms. No one's tested, the sensors. No one's tested, with any periodicity. So operations and maintenance, one, you have to do it with regularity. There are government requirements for annual assessments. There are testing requirements for sensors, alarms on a 30-day basis. The key is you have to depend upon the people running your security programs to actually do that job. So your job from an O&M standpoint is to, one, understand, are they doing that? Two, do they understand why they're doing that? And three, when you have what we used to call in the business a nuisance alarm, are you discounting it or are you actually investigating it? And if you are discounting it, that could lead you down a path that leads you to compliance failure. And so think of a huge campus on, a big campus or a big defense installation. You could have one sensor on a fence that isn't working. But if you have 10 sensors you're ignoring, you have a vulnerability that your customer is going to find. And it is always better to be forthright and tell your customer you have a problem and then come about a common solution to fix that problem versus your customer coming in. And we have all been in this situation where your customer comes in and says, you are unsatisfactory and we're going to give you a 90-day remediation to correct your behaviors. But it becomes, again, security is everyone's responsibility, not only the practitioners, but the programmatic people. If your program says security, you just stay in the background, leave us alone. That's never going to work well. So I have always found that it is a team sport and it is everyone's responsibility. And it is always better when you have legions of people working for you to have them understand the why. And when they tell you they have a problem, don't shoot the messenger. I know lots of people who have been shot along the years, myself included. At the end of the day, you can only fix what you know. And if you pretend you don't know it, you're going to have a bigger problem at the back end.
When we come back, the role of artificial intelligence in securing sensitive sites against unwanted attacks. Stay tuned for more.
Charlie, I want to start with you on this question. We've talked a little bit about this, about, bridging the gap between legacy systems and new technology. And, a lot of times it's one of those things where, hey, we have this old system, but it still works. But you need to implement some sort of new technology to give you a capability you didn't have before. So how can you bridge that gap so that you have your legacy systems and your new systems, and they're actually working together and sharing information the way you need to?
Great. So that's a good question. And we all have to keep abreast of both the technical changes and the policy changes that's going to affect our existing and our near and long-term future security system strategy here. I said earlier that old doesn't go away, but I really want to emphasize that new threats, new evolving threats, and new approaches to how to identify those and deal with them are absolutely critical. And understanding how that is evolving, that goes back to a great deal to my point about establishing the relationships with both the customers and with your colleagues, because they will, as collectively, you will see this coming a lot faster. But starting from the beginning again on this, you need to assume the need to reinvest or maybe even reinvent and build upgrade costs into your security program. And you're going to have to build that into your O&M costs, maybe even some investment piece here. You can't just go to the boss and go to the company and say, give me some more funding. You need a plan. And from my experience, you need to make that case. You need to make that case playing it as straight as you can. You don't want the boss to come back and say, why are you telling me this? You think the sky is falling or something? Unless the sky actually is falling. Rarely is that the case. You're really projecting out into the future if you're doing this correctly here. And it is important to have that ability to approach the leadership directly and be able to tell them concisely and fairly, here's what we have to deal with, here's what the possibilities look like, and here's where this technology is going, and come up with a plan to get ahead of this.
So Casey, I would just jump onto that, because bridging legacy systems has been a challenge for as long as forever. The reality is particularly in the last 20 years, technology continues to move at the speed of light. And oftentimes, people believe that I can just do it as I built my facility. And much like a program, nobody ever buys just a single aircraft. They buy a lot of aircraft. And nobody ever builds just one satellite. They buy a lot of satellites. And the reality is from the beginning, security professionals should be part of the programmatics, not only for secure space requirements, secure network requirements, evolving technologies. That example of the door prop, think about, in days past, those used to be vault doors that if you propped them open, you actually killed the compliance because you destroyed the rubber stripping on the bottom. So then company ABC was no longer in compliance. So you've got to continue to bridge the knowledge of where's the program going so that you can anticipate the needs, anticipate the technology. So if there's an expansion to a program, let's try new technologies in that environment. And if you have a multi-year plan, then your leaders are going to be much more willing to say, okay, this new space, we're going to put this new technology in. And then Charlie will cover it a little bit later, but the integration of old and new is a constant question that security professionals always have to ask themselves.
And to your point about bridging technologies, is also bridging policies as they
Correct.
evolve.
Correct.
And then, Charlie, one of the technologies that's getting a lot of discussion right now is, of course, artificial intelligence. So where do you see AI, specifically, agentic AI, fitting into future security in depth plans and, helping to build these stronger physical security programs? What role can AI play there?
Good question. And of course, AI itself is one of those evolving things. And what I thought I could do yesterday and versus 3 weeks from now, I'm not really sure all the time. But a developed and informed AI program can, at least in theory, look at a facility, help build out plans, both architecturally and mission related, review the known threat situation, sort of what can happen in this environment as opposed to the one down the block, provide a strategy for design implementation for a security plan, and meet with both customer and internal requirements to deter, detect, and deny, in whatever order we pick, that sort of stuff. But in essence, it is how to develop the building security plan and to protect the building during construction, where it becomes the most at this point where it's probably most effective on this. And then once the facility is in operation, it is unlikely that you're going to get any advanced warning that there's a specific attack coming, such as, hey, they're coming at dawn, be careful. It is important that for the system that you put, with an AI system that you put in place for monitoring, to see something, precursors to an event occurring, I mentioned that before, crowds gathering, whatever it may be, and interpret it as far out in time and in space as is reasonably possible. And if the facility perimeter has been breached, it need to know where inside your perimeter now that intruder might exist. And finally, sort of how does that system inform and enable an effective response capability? Not just one and done, hey, we saw somebody come to the fence line, but throughout the existence of that entire event, be able to notify and inform responders as to the whereabouts of where that threat exists right now.
So Casey, let me just jump on the agentic AI because, in this scenario, LVT has a great product that, from a standpoint of a sensor package, the sensor package actually allows the sensors to identify both just the individual crowds and to give that data to someone, inform that data to someone who can take action. So when I think about agentic AI and its ability to collate information, inform, and then allow an organization to respond, and I think about its use case in real scenarios of crowd control, zone of control, agentic AI has real possibility. And like all of AI, it's going to continue to evolve. And to Charlie's point, in every scenario through life cycle of a security program, particularly a physical security program, this really becomes an opportunity space to allow, visibility, information, and the ability to respond in a way that is not that effective and timely today. So it's phenomenal.
When we return, our financial expert is back with advice on how to start planning for retirement today.
Retirement might feel far away, but no matter where you are in your career, the best time to start planning for it is right now. You should have a clear goal in mind, starting with the life you want. Where do you want to live? What will you do? Who will you be with? And how much will it take to be secure in all of that? That vision will be the blueprint for how you save and invest today. Retirement isn't just about the money for tomorrow. It's also about creating the freedom to enjoy what matters the most to you now as well. Love to travel? Want a big family? Goals like these shape your finances. So budget in a way to balance your retirement goals while also fulfilling your life goals. You want to enjoy your life now and in retirement. And don't feel like you have to go it alone. Everyone should get help from an experienced professional who can tailor a plan based on your unique vision. They can help demystify budgeting, saving, and investing, especially if you're juggling military benefits, multiple incomes, or planning for a family. A good one can help to build your wealth and protect your future. Retirement readiness isn't a finish line, it's a mindset. Start now, stay consistent, and build the future that you've worked hard for and deserve.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, jump into Zodiac and point the bow toward militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most steely-eyed missile man in the test pilot squadron, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning bringing you the most recent headlines. And if social media is how you stay up to date, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And for you Gen Z troops, we're on TikTok, so go follow us there as well. When we come back, more from our experts on using cutting-edge tech to stay ahead of threats to sensitive facilities. Stay tuned.
Some of the things that AI is really good on, it's sifting through large amounts of data. It's pattern recognition. The same car is driving past at the same time every day, that kind of thing. So what do you see right now as these are the areas where AI can really help? And then these are areas where it's maybe not quite ready yet, and we still need to make sure that we're relying mostly on humans.
So I think there's a couple of areas where it is incredibly helpful and can be incredibly helpful today. So I think of in the business of, today sensors collect a lot of data. And if there is an event, today we do it post-event. So we go back through the sensor data and we look through a lot of video and we look through a lot of data. If you had AI who could articulate, I'm looking for the white car that drove past Pennsylvania Avenue 15 times in the last month, you begin to get a picture of, in advance, is someone casing your facility? 2, you begin to see of, agentic AI forensic capability. Do you see people going to a parking lot that's 3 blocks from your downtown Detroit facility? And, they come once a week. It's usually on a Thursday. It's usually a day of a board meeting. You can really begin to, one, an event hasn't happened. You can begin to detect, inform, and make countermeasures for what you're going to do about that. Think of every company who has a board of directors meeting, and for whatever reason, there are people who believe that the defense industry is not good. And so you get protesters. Being able to do something about it before it happens, that's really goodness. Being able to identify that a white car is casing 5 different companies and it has, these attributes, those 5 companies, to Charlie's first point, they can all get together and say, okay, what are we going to work with local, state, federal, and our own companies on how to respond to this in a way that will deter before an event actually happens. This is really goodness.
Yeah, and to add to that, what AI can do that is its best tool right now is to see things, come to some elementary interpretations of them, match it to other behaviors that it may have learned about already, and then better inform the responders that have to respond to whatever this anomaly looks like, so that they are not just completely responding to a bell going off, but they're responding to the bell went off because this guy is doing this particular behavior in the parking lot, or this particular car is going by for the 3rd time acting strangely.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.